Good morning. I am live, just a little bit late, but I'm here. And actually, I'm still involved in the process of setting up. So I do hope that Marcia, welcome. Nick, welcome. Catherine, welcome. Uh, I hope I'm coming across reasonably clearly. Uh, I'm also hoping that it will not have the same problem as yesterday of having a significant cutting out. What I think happened was I was on a Wi-Fi connection somewhere here in this building when I was sitting here. By the way, I'm trying again that same location where I began yesterday. Yesterday, you may remember I had to move because of the considerable amount of noise from the weed eater that was kind of, well, you can't tell the poor guy to go away and not do his job, can you? Um, so I found a nice spot, which I'm sure that I will use again, but I wanted to try coming back to this spot under this very nice tree. Uh, Let me show you the tree above me here. And the only thing about this spot, by the way, we've got the pathway on the north side of the building with various little palms and some rose bushes and some other plants that I'm not skillful enough to identify. And of course, behind me is Manning Avenue, which has more cars on it than I thought it would. Uh, it's not. It usually this time of morning, though, it is quite busy because Manning Avenue. Uh, I think a lot of people have discovered it as a shortcut from wherever point A to the east might be to point B in the west, or vice versa. Um, Evenings, in fact, there's a stop sign just the other side of the house down here. And evenings, the traffic, because of that stop sign, is backed up to way down there, um, down the hill. It may also be at some point David Goliath. Hello, thank you. And Joan and everybody else. Mary Pat, Sonia, Susan, of course. Faithful Susan. Faithful Susan and faithful Marcia and faithful everybody else who seems to enjoy spending this time, half hour between 9 and 9:30 with me. Listen carefully, there is a jet plane going overhead. They are still flying. Uh, if you're subscribed to my newsletter, one of the things I'm planning to do when I write it today and send it out in the wee hours of tomorrow morning will be a few links to the airline industry. Particularly, this has been an area of fascination to me. With all of these airliners that are not flying, where are the airlines parking them? Where are they putting them? And there's a few fascinating answers to that, which is going to be in my newsletter. You can, if you're not subscribing to it, here is a shameless bit of self-promotion. Go to my blog, which is tomwelbers.net. How much? Oh, here comes the big blue bus. You may see it passing behind me. Yeah, there it is. That's line number 5. That's the line that goes from just down the hill here out to Santa Monica. It's the line that I will take if I'm going into Beverly Hills to see a doctor. It lets me off in Century City, and it's about a 20-minute walk, 25-minute walk from there to my doctor's office in Beverly Hills. So I take that bus to Century City and then have a very nice walk, which means by the time the doctor examines me, I'm in pretty good shape. And if I do that every day, of course, going to stay in good shape. But the buses are still running. I'm not on any of them. I don't know how crowded they are. I would, when I was riding on them, there were an awful lot of people who obviously depended on the buses for transportation from where they lived to where they worked, and where they lived, of course, was in a low-income area, let's say, and where they worked, of course, was in the much higher income, cleaning people's homes. And there would be a lot of, I could just pretty well tell. I never really got to know any of the people, but I got to know their. There is still a bit of traffic around here, isn't there? That was a delivery truck for janitorial supplies that had left its cargo in back and was now turning. But this is the world. So a lot of people on the bus who probably are still going on the bus and hopefully are being relatively safe and relatively secure. So anyway, check my, now to go back to a previous sidetrack, check my website, www. Well, you don't need the www. TomWelbers.net will get you to my homepage, which needs updating. But in the menu bar above, there is one menu item that says newsletters. Click on that, and that will take you to the archive page of all of my newsletters and a link where you can subscribe. So join me. You're joining me for coffee. You seem to be enjoying the coffee, and I appreciate 22 people are watching right now. I checked yesterday's numbers, and between Facebook and YouTube, it looked like there were about between 100 and 150 people who were who watched it, at least watched part of it. So welcome to all of you. Today, I started my day with prayer and exercise before having my first cup of coffee. I did get on my stationary bicycle for about 15 minutes while I was doing morning prayer and the Office of Readings. The Office of Readings is quite interesting right now because it's going through, we're just now at the 4th chapter, going through the book of Revelation. And at some point I'll talk a little bit more about that. That's a very special book for our I see somebody has sent me a message. I would like to say as often as I can, please do not use Facebook Messenger for me. I do not like Facebook Messenger. Sometimes I will reply, sometimes I won't. Don't be offended if I don't reply. But a lot of people want to message me just to say, hello, hello. And no, I'm afraid I'm not able to do that. So please don't use Facebook Messenger. If you want to make a comment or want to say something, use a public comment on my Facebook page. I don't engage in private conversations over Facebook. So please respect that, okay? Now, that having been said, where was I? I started my morning with prayer and the book of Revelation. I'll probably talk about that as we get into it. That's a very special book for the Easter period. We're not reading that on Sundays this year. I forget what year it is, whether we have it on the Sundays of Easter, but it's not on Sundays this year. So it's First Letter of St. Peter, which is also a fascinating book. That's on Sundays during Easter this year. So, um, one of the other things that I check in the morning, as you know, I start at 5:30 with the video camera at my window, have it on for about for about an hour to watch the entirety of the sunrise, and then the time-lapse photography condenses that down into 30 seconds. And then I add a soundtrack of birds tweeting, which actually I made several soundtracks of it before. I think you can hear a couple of birds right now over and above the traffic. So one of the things that I do look forward to reading in the morning is Father Richard Rohr and his messages from the Center for Contemplation and Action. And this week he is doing some things on John of the Cross. You may recall yesterday I reflected quite extensively, took up just about the whole of my talk with you yesterday on Father Jim Finley's commentary on St. John of the Cross, which I found very thought-provoking throughout the rest of the day. Father Ian Matthew is a Carmelite priest from England who has written some very impactful books about St. John of the Cross. That is a pun because his book is entitled The Impact of God, Soundings from St. John of the Cross. And since I did not get into prayer this morning, because I started talking about all kinds of other things, what I would like to do for our prayer is to read and maybe comment on a little bit this passage that he has from Father Matthew about John of the Cross, speaking about the purpose of darkness, the purpose of the dark night of the soul. And it's extremely, extremely thought-provoking. By the way, you can find this at the Center for Action and Contemplation website. It's very simple. C as in center, A as in action, C as in contemplation. So cac.org. And if you want to read it, I recommend that you check out that website and maybe subscribe to Father Richard Rohr's daily reflections. So here he's quoting this Father Matthew, Father Ian Matthew. Poet, pastor, mystic, John of the Cross is first a witness to the impact of God in his life. In other words, God impacted John's life. John of the Cross was receptive to the work of God in his life. And you look up the history and the biography of John of the Cross, and God revealed himself through suffering and rejection. John joined with Teresa of Avila in seeking to establish reformed communities of Carmelites. Reformed because they had grown lax, they had grown worldly, they had grown self-centered, they had grown fat in more ways than one. And they sought to reform it. But that reform, of course, raised opposition. People in a, people in a very self-gratifying way of life tend to do anything that they can to maintain and preserve and protect that way of life that they like. And John of the Cross challenged that. And his life was threatened. Imagine, his fellow Carmelites threatened him with death, and they ended up imprisoning him in a dark cell without any lights except a window in the next room, which was, of course, locked. A dark cell filled with vermin and not much else. And he was there for a very long time. I forget exactly how long. Finally, he escaped and took refuge in the convent that Teresa had. But it was, he is one who really, really discovered God, or as I think he likes to put it, and I like to put it, allowed God to discover him in the midst of suffering and deprivation. And the kind of suffering, and I think this is really quite important, the kind of suffering that results from our fidelity to God. Not the kind of suffering that results from our own perhaps distorted desires, or our own seeking of a comfortable lifestyle that kind of ruins our health. You know, it's not the kind of suffering that we would say afflicts everybody. We know that there's a lot of types of suffering that afflict everybody. Our job as Christians is not so much to run away from that as it is to help one another in it. But the kind of suffering that Jesus calls us to, and that John was sensitive to, was the suffering that is involved in actually taking Jesus seriously and following him even at the cost of ridicule, rejection, and even at the cost of the cross, because that is what it cost Jesus to be faithful to the Word of God that he was. So, John has taken the risk of surrender. I'm getting back to reading this now. John has taken the risk of surrender, and he can speak with the authority of one who has been there. He testifies to a God who precisely is pressing in to meet, to change, and to fill us in our deepest need. And think for a moment, can we distinguish our deep needs from our superficial needs? It could be that this time of coronavirus is depriving us of some of our superficial needs. Maybe in it this time we can discover and identify our deepest needs. Love changes people, and John's witness to God's love may help us to trust and to be brave. A generous God is fine when things are running smoothly. But what about when they are not, and darkness is invading? What about when trusted patterns have broken down, or we feel too far gone to bother even trying? We dwell at our outer limits, and some events in life, loss, failure, stress, sin, remind us of the threat of chaos. That is where John of the Cross stands, at the threshold of uncertainty. He assures us that what dwells beyond is not simply chaos. The darkness bears the Spirit of God who broods over the waters of death and has the power to work a resurrection. In our darkness, John finds Jesus' darkness. And what he echoes is the impact of Easter. Night cannot stop it. Pardon me, I didn't read that right. Night, we cannot stop it or hasten it. It just comes. And night teaches us every 24 hours that we are not in complete control. John does seem to think there is something here important. Others speak of growth and suffering and purification, but John is calling it night, calling it dark night, very appropriately. John's imprisonment in Toledo and escape gave to the symbol of night its full weight. For him, the symbol is able to carry humanity's pain, able to hold even such a sense of alienation from God that the inner self feels dismantled. That is the resonance of the symbol of night for John. Night signifies that which comes upon us and takes us out of our own control. It announces that, as the place of resurrection, a God who heals in darkness. This is John's hope. This is John's word of hope in a destabilized world. So perhaps today it might be good for us to, if you can, go to this particular reading on the Center for Action and Contemplation.org and read it again, meditate on it, think about it. Think about where the darkness of your night and perhaps of our night is located. And this insight about night is something that is out of our control. You know, whether I liked it or not, and I have to say I did like it, but sometimes it's difficult to get up for it. The sunrise is out of my control. I enjoy the sunrise once I'm up. I don't always enjoy getting up, but I enjoy the sunrise in the early morning hours once I'm up because I have relinquished control of the sunrise and of the day to what is out of my control. Similarly at sunset and at night. What have we done? For good, but not entirely for good. We have attempted to turn night into day. Electricity has done that. And we take it for granted. We take it for granted that when it is dark, it is not dark. That may not be entirely a good thing. People of just a couple of centuries ago had to leave light out of their control. When it was daylight, you do what you can do in daylight. When it is night, you do what the darkness beckons to. And let's face it, for some people, darkness beckons to sin. Darkness beckons to evil. Darkness beckons to the kinds of work that don't want to be displayed in daylight. And there's all kinds of them. And for other people, like John of the Cross, darkness is something that leads to the light that is beyond daylight. The light that is beyond daylight. The eternal light of God. So, yeah, we walk in darkness now, but we walk in trust and faith that the light of Christ is with us, illuminating meaning, a meaning that is beyond whatever we can, whatever it is that we can experience. I get the word that the sound is off. I have no idea what happened there. It could be that the battery is getting low. I'm Sound is back on. Well, that's good. This is depending, by the way, on the LTE service. It's depending on cellular service out here rather than Wi-Fi service. So that may be a part of it. The other thing I think is because of our reliance on social media these days, I wonder to what extent our whole internet network is getting stretched. I haven't really read anything about that, but I don't think our internet capabilities were actually meant to handle as much traffic as this is happening, as is happening now. People are reflecting all kinds of technical problems with this. Thank you, John. Tech problem for days. So we'll see where all of this takes us. But you might want to think, when was the last time I'm thinking about this, and I can't really say at this moment. When was the last time that you actually experienced total darkness? Total darkness. And what was it like? And what did the light mean when darkness came? Hello. How are you? We have a visitor. I'm trying to remember your name.
Betty.
I'm sorry?
Betty.
Hey.
Betty.
Betty, that's right. Betty. Now I know. Betty has joined me here. And Betty, I'm talking to about 20 people, my friends on the internet, and a lot more will be joining us. So, Betty, would you like to say hi?
Hi.
So Betty says hi. Everybody wave at Betty now and say hi to her, although she can't see you. But thank you for joining us, Betty. But I am just about to sign off now. We've come to the end of our time. So God bless you all, and may the Lord bless and keep you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. If there's anything that you'd really like me to talk about during these times, I'm going to be on tomorrow, and then Sunday I'm taking the day off, and I'll be back on Monday. But, if there's anything you'd like me to talk about, I'll be happy to give whatever reflections I might be able to on this. So, by the way, Marcia says, hello, Betty. And Kathy says, hello, Betty. Susan says, hello, Betty. So they are responding to you here. And Irene says, hello, Betty. So hello and goodbye to all of you. And God bless you. And Betty was a wonderful surprise to join us, wasn't she? Take care, and God bless you now.